I am at the park, clearly. We're here outdoors because I had quite a rough morning, and that is only natural considering the fact that I live with some things that make my human experience a little bit difficult. One of them being C-PTSD. That is something that I have not talked about publicly before, and that makes me very nervous. But I have decided that if it's helpful to someone else, it's worth it to lean into that discomfort within the boundaries that I'm comfortable with, because this is a very scary diagnosis to navigate alone, and it takes shape in many different forms and looks different for a lot of different people. And while the media tries, and while the media is getting better about it, it misrepresents a lot. And specifically in the realm of PTSD and C-PTSD, the only representation that you really see these days is for war veterans, which can feel invalidating for people who that doesn't apply to, and almost make it feel like you don't deserve your diagnosis, which is of course ridiculous, but the mind sometimes does not concede with reason, you know. I think it's important to see other people with similar diagnoses to you, whatever that diagnosis may be, living a whole and fulfilling life. And while the struggles that we have deserve to be recognized, we also don't deserve to make such a big deal out of things, you know. It is about celebrating the small wins, but it is also a little bit discouraging to feel like your small wins have to be celebrated because you have an ailment. So while I want to say that it's important to see other people being brave, it's also important to see other people with a similar diagnosis to you just treating it like it's normal. A point that I really want to drive home throughout this entire video is that this diagnosis, and every diagnosis, looks different for every single person who has it. For me specifically, a big facet of it is nightmares. Last night was one of the nights that I woke up very hysterical. That's something that happens, and that's not an admission of defeat. It is an admission of acceptance, because that is necessary for processing and bringing about change. All of this brings me to now. I gave myself the morning to care for myself. I'm proud of myself for waking up in a state like that and having the self-compassion instead of the self-judgment that I used to carry for a very long time, up until very recently, and still do struggle with sometimes. I was able to allow myself not to make the bed. I was able to break a dish while I was making my breakfast because I was so anxious and not reprimand myself for it. I was able to feed myself. I was able to take my medication. I was able to dress myself, walk myself to the park, sit in the sunshine, drink some water, stretch my body. All of those things are major, major acts of radical self-compassion that I deserve and that you deserve. Different routines and different methods of self-care and recuperation after a night like that, or a depressive episode or something similar, exist for different people, and exist for different people in different times, you know. Like, what helped me today may not be what helps me 3 weeks from now, but that's okay. That's the nature of the game and the nature of being intuitive with your needs and listening to your body when it sends you cues, which I know can be difficult with a diagnosis like this, because sometimes it can feel like you are not fully in control of your body and the responses that it has, and that's very real. I'm here to validate that that is real, and it sucks and it's hard, and it can come in so many different ways. Still figuring out what to do about the dissociation. That's a conversation for another day, because today we're talking about nightmares. So I thought I would share with you how I got from point A to point B today, and how you can develop a routine like that for yourself. At some point I want to do a more all-encompassing video about the books I've read, the strategies that have helped me the most, specific playlists, specific meditations, mantras, medication, maybe not medications because that's really personal to everyone, tips for finding care that's accessible and affordable, because although it is absolutely heinous, I recognize that those are not resources that everybody has access to. I am in a place where I have to lean into the hope more than I lean into the dreadfulness, and so I have hope that maybe we'll see this becoming a norm, a universal thing that people have access to by the end of my lifetime. And the only people who can make that happen is us, right? The only people who can make that happen is people like me having these conversations on the internet, and people like you watching this video, and people who smile at each other on the sidewalk, and people who volunteer, and people who care. So yeah, because I recognize that care is not a privilege everybody has, which is, it's so ridiculous to even think that it is something to be a privilege when it should just be. Not my art having an opinion when it should just be equitable and ever present. I feel a responsibility to be helpful to this community that I belong to in a really safe and well-intentioned and honest way. Of course, I am not a therapist, I am not a psychiatrist, I am a very mentally ill girl trying my best, implementing things through trial and error and learning as I go, who really just wants to see you hopefully have a more expedited journey to finding things that work for you than I did. I mean, there's no end, right? These are things that we live with and things that we learn to manage. Something that my sister says to me is that when it comes to things that you struggle with, diagnoses, certain factors in your life, maybe familiar relationships, circumstances, it's important to treat them as dinner guests, because if they are at your dinner table and in your peripherals, even if you're not speaking directly, you have a good gauge on how they're doing and they can't sneak up on you. They can't show up like an uninvited dinner guest. So the goal is not to be a perpetual self-improvement project, right? You are whole as you are, and I don't even want to say perfect as you are, because there's no such thing as perfect, thankfully. You know, the idea of perfection is exhausting. But you deserve to let those feelings turn into friends and to learn how to manage them. Life shouldn't have to feel so hard, and I am here to help you to the best of my ability figure out how to make it less hard. And again, I don't have all the answers, and again, everybody's experience looks different, and again, nightmares are just one really small aspect of this diagnosis. I really don't mean to minimize C-PTSD, but that is what showed up for me today and what has been showing up for me a lot for a very long time. I think I want to make this a series. I want to make more in-depth videos. I want to share more about this. Be gentle with me, please. This is really vulnerable and scary to talk about, but as cheesy as it sounds, this is the kind of video that I would want to see on my subscription feed. This is the kind of thing that would make me feel seen in a world like this. So yeah. So we're at the park. I am coloring myself a little photo. I never said that I was good at it. I just said that I enjoy it. I think it's very important to have hobbies that you just enjoy without having the pressure to be good at them or monetize them or be popular for. So without further ado, let's have a picnic together. Today is about nurturing my inner child, holding her, cradling her, and guiding her every step of the way. Thank you for being here to be a part of that, and I hope you can take something from this. Cheers.
So long silent movies, the quiet dances on the screen.
Picture me, right? Looking up at this view. And what's playing in my headphones is the intro to 2009. This is my final form. The most lovely day out today. I have my best girl with me. And I don't have anything in particular on the agenda. I brought some art supplies, some books, might listen to some music, packed myself a little lunch to nourish my body. And I just want to be here, out in the world, remembering that I'm safe and that this is my life. And I exist to enjoy it as it is in this moment.
What? You want me to throw you a ball or something? Bring it to me then, good girl.
So this morning, contrary to what I normally do, I let myself get out of bed without making it, which is kind of a hard call to make, because it's like, do you push yourself to do the things that you don't want to do to gain momentum and teach yourself discipline? Like, do you just need tough love? Or do you lean into being gentle with yourself and breaking your routine, because sometimes that is necessary? Today I leaned on the side of not doing the disciplinary thing, but I did things that were good for me. There's actually a really beautiful song that I love so much. There's actually a really beautiful album that I love so much that kind of talks about this idea that has honestly been the soundtrack to my life since it came out. It's by Eliza McLam. Surprise, surprise. I'm obsessed with her. Will I ever stop talking about her? Probably not. It's called the Salt Circle album, and the song Salt Circle in particular has an outro that talks about sitting in the grass and letting the feeling turn into a friend. As hard as that is, and as scary as it is, and how non-streamlined it is to do that. It's kind of like when someone says feel your feelings. I know for the longest time I personally was like, what the fuck does that even mean? But it is worth it. Something that really helped me to understand was pinpointing an area of my body where I can feel the tension or I can feel the stress when I'm experiencing a difficult emotion or flashback or just recounting something in talk therapy. A lot of times I can feel those things in my throat or in my stomach, in my chest. One time in particular, I was telling her a story and she ever so generously looked at me and was like, do you realize that when you talk about this, you physically make yourself as small as you possibly can? And I was like, ma'am, please get your hand off of my throat. Thank you very much. Please and thank you. Let me throw the ball. She's been staring at me this whole time. This is my view. Get it. Good girl. So this may not work for everyone, and I personally didn't want to do it for a while because I didn't want to make the bad thing worse by giving attention to it. You know, for a long time when I would wake up from my nightmares, I would just kind of brush them off, not give them any power, not speak them into existence, because I thought that that would exasperate them. And I think there is a certain level of truth to that, but I do think when you're seeing a pattern reoccur in your life, it is important to pay attention to it at a certain point. I've recently started keeping a nightmare log, specifically so that I can track whether or not the medication that I'm on to help with the nightmares is effective and communicate to my psychiatrist whether or not we need to make any changes to it. I will say that it's been hard for me to tell so far. It's been a little while since I started it. I don't really want to give specifics on here. I know I'm sharing my experience, but I'm also trying to be as vague as possible. A, because this is still really uncomfortable for me, and while I do want to lean into it, I also want to ease into it. And B, because everyone's experience is different, and so to a certain extent, me sharing specific details is not really helpful to you. So I've started keeping a log. When I woke up, I rolled over and immediately jotted it down, because it's easy to meet with your psychiatrist every 2 months, 3 weeks, 6 months, however frequently you meet with them, and kind of be blinded by your own bias of what the past, say, 48 hours have been like, instead of having a realistic view of whether or not your medications are working. So keeping a nightmare log helps me to realistically look back and say, I might feel like I'm having a lot of nightmares, but how many did I actually have in the past 7 days? Oh, 6 out of the 7 days. Wow, okay, yeah, we actually do need to make a lot of changes. Or, oh, I'm actually not having any nightmares anymore. But contrary to that, I've been having them every single night. It just helps me to have a more realistic way to look back that's not biased or minimizing my experience at all, which I have found helpful. I try to keep them as concise as possible while still providing the details that are necessary so that I can track what repeating patterns are coming up for me. But again, it's just one part of the diagnosis and one part of the lived experience that I have, so I try not to fixate too much on it and just keep an eye on how it's going and what's happening with it. Like Miles said,
When got like
I think one of the biggest things I've learned is not to be frustrated with yourself. Well, I mean, it's natural to get frustrated with yourself, but I think one of the most important things I've learned is to meet that frustration and say, I observe that anger, that's valid. I raise you compassion because this is out of your control, and different things are going to work for different people. I've said that a million times in this vlog, but I really just want to drive that point home. But something that kind of works for me is I have a little condescending voice that I'll put on towards myself. You could see it a little bit in one of my past vlogs. It was the past vlog when I was talking about how I was overthinking wearing the same turtleneck too many times, which is the most ridiculous thing ever, because A, sustainability, B, comfort, C, life, and that's a little bit of it right there. But in that vlog I was telling myself, maybe you want to wear this turtleneck more than once because you paid for it, because it's comfortable, because it's cold outside, because it feels good on your skin, because it's the middle of winter. Maybe you paid good money for this turtleneck and you really like it, and it's a part of your wardrobe that you should get good use out of. Who would have thought? And so I try to approach my feelings with that same attitude, or my nightmares with that same attitude, or bodily responses that I'll have with that attitude sometimes when I'm being a little bit too self-critical and expecting too much perfection, too much composure, too much orderliness, when those things just really don't even have a purpose. They're not even possible, you know? Like if I'm finding myself feeling guilty for something that was not my fault, I will walk myself through the ways in which the story that I'm telling myself is false, and and I will question my beliefs and look for cognitive distortions. I've talked about those before. If you're familiar with mental health at all, you're probably familiar with cognitive distortions, but just in case you're not, they are ways in which our thinking is biased through a variety of different filters, let's say. Some examples would be black and white thinking, fortune telling, minimizing the positive, magnifying the negative, catastrophizing. There's quite a lot. And if you're curious about learning more about that, I definitely recommend that you do. I think we all inevitably have some, but as soon as we are able to identify them, we are able to start working on them, which is powerful. I love this park because it's so expansive, and there's parts of it that look like a forest that you would find a fairy roaming around in. For example, I'm looking at this staircase. It's made of bricks. When the sun shines through those weeds just right, it looks absolutely magical. I love it here. I'm only gonna throw your ball if you say please. Only if you say please, mom, you're the best mom in the whole world. Poor girl. She's my emotional support animal. She's like, Mom, I'm tired of ESAing. Please, I don't have any more ESA in me. I'm on overtime. I'm setting a boundary with you. I cannot pick up any more shifts.
And this kitty, mama. Here. Good girl.
All right, and that about does it for me, folks. I've been here for quite a while. So long that my partner has shown up and joined me. He's actually so sweet. I've been talking to him about how I want to volunteer at this park more, and he stopped at the recreation center and got me some brochures, which is so cute. My camera is blinking at me, which means that I have been speaking for far too long. So again, I hope that you were able to take something helpful from this, and in the very least, I appreciate you caring what the experience of a person with C-PTSD looks like, and for listening to me and giving me a safe space. I'm sending you love and wishes for health and joy and community, and I'll see you soon. Bye. He's watching her play. He's her cheerleader. Oh, he's eating. Oh, look at him. I love their tails. It's like the size of his body. Who knows? That could be me in my next life. I would be a squirrel in my next life. What would you be? A wolf? I'd be a sea otter. Those little sea otters you see in the aquarium that are just swimming in water all day. So happy. Oh wait, I'm zooming. Ah! I can't.